Hello, everybody. I am Baxter and Rosenblatt. I am thrilled to be here, as always. And I am technically the North American faculty in residence for the conservative yeshiva at the Fuchsburg Jerusalem Center, which is a ridiculously long title. And what it means is that I get to teach people based in North America and also all over the world. I get to do classes like this for Marcia. I get to do, if you have a synagogue that wants to bring me to do a Shabbat in residence, I do lots of those. I'm right now doing a lot of teaching college students, which is really interesting given the world right now. But for those of you who haven't learned with me before, the thing that is special, unique, more of a requirement on you for my classes is that I do not really lecture. I know a bunch of stuff, but I don't like to listen to myself talk. So I'm much more interested in what the group of us can come up with together. I'm much more interested in being the one who can weave together all of our thoughts into something that's never been thought before than me coming and saying, well, actually, what scholarship says about is although if you all are going to hide and sit and stay silent, I'm going to have to turn on my best lecturer capacity. So, which is to say, please, if you are hiding off screen, come on, turn on your screen. Y'all are beautiful. And I want to see you. I want to be in the same Zoom room as you. And we will get started. I'm going to lecture you for just a couple of minutes, and then we'll turn to some texts together. The way it works is if you have something to say, raise your actual hand or raise your Zoom hand, and I will call on you. When you are speaking, give us the idea and get out. Talking like 3 sentences and not those like crazy German sentences, just like 3 sentences in and out. And if you have a dissertation you want to share with us, email it to me. Don't get up on the podium and start talking. So, you guys ready? Let's do this. So, this is technically the second in a series of 3 classes looking at governance in Genesis. And it's these 3 classes are based on a strange idea, which if you were here with me 2 weeks ago, we looked at in some depth, which is that in Genesis 1, we are created in the image of God, B'Tselem Elohim, and God then tells us to rule. And we say, okay, if we're created in the image of God and we are meant to rule, then we're supposed to learn how to rule from what God does. Ruling is somehow a divine quality, and for us to rule means to be like God in some sense, to emulate God in some way by ruling. 2 weeks ago, we thought a lot about Genesis 1 as an example of ruling, and we said, okay, what God is doing is God is separating and God is creating order. And that's really the essence of God's governance, God's leadership in Genesis 1. When you think of creation as governance, what governance then is separation and the creation of order. And that seems good. That seems like, all right, that's how you run an effective bureaucratic state. And we looked in Genesis 1 and saw all these like checks on power. We said, okay, after each time God acts, God stops and evaluates and says, oh, was that any good? Yeah, that's good. I've checked. I'm going to keep going. And we said, lovely. Yafei, that's how governing should work. Now, the story continues, Genesis continues, and we get another 11 chapters until we get to Abraham. And those 11 chapters are full of humans trying to, if not govern themselves, then just exist, humans with humans. And it's a bit of a mess. That what happens when humans exist with humans is we tend to murder each other. It's not very great. These are not a pretty first 11 chapters of Genesis. Right away, we have Cain killing Abel. And then we shift into the flood story, where the entire world is filled with violence. And it seems like the way that humans try to rule, it seems like the thing that humans are doing, what it means for humans to rule the world is for humans to bring violence into the world. That is how we understand our role. And when we look back at Genesis 1, God gave us dominion over, God told us to rule over the animals. God didn't tell us to rule over our fellow humans. So there's confusion about what exactly it means to rule. How are we supposed to relate to our other humans? What does it mean to rule over humans? How do we be in relationship with humans? Do we treat them like animals? Are we supposed to be violent over humans the way we're violent over animals? At the end of the flood story, God clarifies and says, yes, in fact, you can be violent towards animals. You can kill and eat animals. But, and I'm going to say this verse in Hebrew first because it's so pretty. God says, shofek dam ha'adam ba'adam damo yishafek, which, and the translation doesn't sound that good. The Hebrew's lovely. Translation is, one who spills the blood of man, by man will his blood be spilled. Okay. So it's this line about violence. It's this line about, okay, if you are being violent, if you're using violence as a tool of ruling, know that that does not, in fact, put you above anybody else. If I were to kill Sylvia's brother, I could expect Sylvia to come after me. That violence is not in that phrase of God's an effective tool for establishing rulership, governance, or dominion in any way. All right. So we come out of the flood story and we start the Abraham story. And Abraham is, for the first time, going to provide us a very different model of governance and leadership. And that's what we're looking at today. We are going to try and go through a lot of sources. I think about half of you have learned with me before. For those of you who learn with me on a regular basis, you know that I always bring a ton of sources and then we get through like 2 of them because it's too good to just run through everything. So that's fine. We'll see where we get taken. We'll see what we come up with. I'm going to give a tiny preamble to the sources, but before I do it, does anybody have thoughts or questions about anything I've said so far? No, we good. So let's continue. So we're looking at the Abraham story. We're looking at Abraham as an example of a person who rules, as a person who governs, and saying, how does this work? How is it an example of ruling in the image of God? How does it relate to what God did in Genesis 1, where governance was creation and separation? What is the role of violence in Abraham's governance? What aspects of Abraham get emphasized as okay, this is the model of what it means to be a good ruler? What is the relationship of Abraham's governance to God? How is God part of the picture or not part of the picture? And finally, what sort of ruler is Abraham and what sort of ruler is Abraham not? To what degree is he defined as a king, and to what degree is he very consciously defined as a not king, and we're pushing back against kingship? So I'm going to share a source sheet with you in the chat. And bear with. let me just find that. You think I knew how Zoom worked by this point. That's not it. One sec, I'm sorry. Here we go. I made it on Safaria, so if your Safaria settings are showing up and it's all in Hebrew, you can just toggle on Safaria so it shows up in English or English and Hebrew or in whatever language you choose to read Hebrew Bible in. All right, so we're going to start with Genesis 12, verse 3. This is very beginning of the Abraham story. This is Lech Lecha for those of you following along in your parashot. This is God saying, get up and go from your land, from your birthplace to the land that I will show you. And then we get this verse, Genesis 12, verse 3. Marcia is not here to chant for us. Do I have any cantors hidden in the room who feel, or non-cantors who feel up for chanting? I feel like I'm always surprised by the people who are like, yeah, actually, I have the most beautiful voice in the world, and you never knew it. That is definitely not me. There's a reason I do not chant in public ever, and it's because I don't want your ears to start bleeding. All right, anybody up for reading it in the Hebrew? Yeah, go for it.
Except I don't see it.
Oh, it's in, if you click on the chat, it's in the chat.
Oh, it's in the chat. Okay, got it. Sorry.
Okay,
hang on a second.
Thank you.
Okay, here it comes. Okay. I can try to chant it if you want, like as a Torah portion kind of thing.
Yeah. Go for it. Why not?
Va'avaracha mevarechecha maklelecha aor v'nivrechu v'cha kol mishpachot ha'adama.
Well done. What's what I'm talking about.
It's Scott. I know I'm listed as, oh, you said Kol HaKavod? Sorry.
Was
Keep
awesome.
going.
That was awesome. But yes, thank you, Scott. All right. So, and in English, that is God saying to Abraham, I will bless those who bless you and curse the ones who curse you, and all the families of the earth shall bless themselves through you or by means of you. All right. So all those questions I just put up, I just listed, talk to me about this. Talk to me about this as an answer to the violence of the flood story that just happened. Talk to me about how this verse imagines governance or leadership.
Mhm.
Talk to me about how this verse creates order. Talk to me about separation here. How is the world ordered in the way this verse is imagining the world? What's this verse doing? And once again, for those of you who've just come in, put your videos on, and if you want to say something, raise your hand and I will call on you. So thoughts? What's going on here? Scott, hello.
I would just say, like, it's sort of unsatisfying in a lot of ways because it's just so big, but at least we know there are those who are, God's going to bless those who bless the Israelites, and those who curse the Israelites, he's not going to help. So, like, at least we know that there's a sense of what's right, what's wrong, but it's very unclear. It's just a general kind of thing. It's dividing the world into two groups.
Awesome. Okay. So dividing the world into two groups, and the way the division is made is those who bless Abraham do well, and those who don't bless Abraham do poorly. Awesome. Okay. Alan, add to that.
There's a piece missing here where we're supposed to adjudicate which we assume from what God said to Noah at the end. And but God's the adjudicator, and we have rules. We're supposed to behave, but if we don't, God will take care of it.
Great. Okay. Yeah. So there's something here about, like, is Abraham supposed to be making this happen, or is God making this happen? Well, in verse 3, this verse that Scott just chanted for us, God's doing all of the doing. God is blessing, God is cursing, and it's not yet on Abraham to do anything. Yafé. Okay. Keep digging, keep pushing. What else have you got? What else have you got about creation, about how this creates order, how this creates separation, about what this says about governing, about Abraham's role versus God's role, about all those other nations? How is this a response to the flood? There's so much going on here. I want to hear. Tell me. Yeah, Raya.
So are we only talking about the first these 4 lines? Is that correct?
That's what I want to focus on. If you've got something that's a little bit bigger but still related.
No, I'm just going to focus on those 4 lines.
Yeah.
So there's a line, there's a connection between God and Abraham, and then Abraham to the rest of the world. And it's through Abraham that God has a connection to the rest of the world in this. But it goes against the concept of God being all knowing and all doing. But this is just a single man that it's like, I don't know if you have an electric system with the box and you only have one, what do they call it, that you change if it goes bad.
Used to be a fuse box, breaker box.
Yeah. Okay, so that's Abraham, and that has huge implications. And so forget about what follows, but just that.
Great. Okay, yeah, this is awesome, crazy, right? Like Abraham is the one mediating, or the one through which God flows to the world, and vice versa. Okay. So that like creation of order is, we've got all the nations, and then Abraham is the thing that nations have to get to God through Abraham, and God's got to get to nations through Abraham. You fit. All right, Sylvia.
Well, I kind of read this a little bit personally to Abraham. I thought I read it as God is talking about Abraham, not necessarily the Israeli people, but Abraham. If somebody blesses you, that's great. I'm gonna bless them. If they do something bad to you, I'm gonna get them for you. So I don't see yet that we're up to Abraham's taking responsibility for anybody. So that speaks to he's not the king.
Okay, interesting. And yeah, so clarification, right, is that this is just about Abraham at this point. Abraham doesn't have any kids. The Israelite people aren't even a sparkle in his eye yet. We're a couple of generations away from Bnei Israel, from the sons of Israel, sons of Jacob. And Abraham's going to have all sorts of trouble having kids. There's, I think, as Rayo is pointing out, there's 2 parts to this verse, right? There's the part that's addressed to, like, that's promising something to Abraham, where it's, I will bless those who bless you and I will curse those who curse you. And then there's the second part, which is and through you all the families, all the peoples of the earth will be blessed. And that's, there's something interesting going on there with it's a passive verb, right? It's nivrachu, will be blessed, or shall bless themselves, and which is a translation choice on the English part here. There's a question of how, like, what's the mechanism? How are these other nations getting blessed? Chuck, and then Alan.
Comment on the advantage of the Hebrew over English. When it says you in Hebrew, it's obvious it's singular. We lose that because English is not an inflected language. So, yay, Hebrew.
Yeah. Yep. And from this point on, I'll be conducting this entire shiur be'ivrit as no, stop. All right.
Toda.
If only next year in Hebrew. All right, thank you, Chuck. Alan.
I just wanted to point out that this isn't the first time that the word of blessing and humans are tied together. Without getting into what blessing means, in Genesis 1:28, we have Vayavorech otam Elohim, that God blessed them. So we have to take that into consideration, what a blessing is and what the dynamic between the blesser and the blessed is.
Fantastic. And thank you, Alan. And that's a huge can of worms. Let's open that can up just enough to let like 2 worms out. And then we'll come back to the idea of governance. But yeah, there's something going on with like why blessing. Who, Rhea, it was you? Somebody who, yeah, Rhea, it was you who had that like electric fuse box image with what the relationship is between God, Abraham, and all the other nations. And I loved what you did with Abraham is sort of the thing through which God and the people have to pass. Alan's adding that there's something about like the way stuff passes is through blessing, and it's worth thinking briefly about what that means. That we're talking about blessings and curses, that blessings are something God does, but it's also something people can do, sort of. Why blessing? How do we think of blessing as governance? How do we think of blessing as creating order, or blessing as leadership? How do we think of blessing as acting as that mechanism between God, Abraham, and all the families of the earth? Yeah, Chuck.
The word blessing is problematical because we really don't know what it means. I've heard Arthur Waskow translates Baruch atah Adonai as "Wow, are you God?" I don't know if that's true, but it's a good story.
It's a lovely story. Yeah, I'm so problematic because we don't know exactly what it means. It's something that God can do and people can do. It's something that, and as we pointed out earlier, the passive v'nivrachu and all the nations of the earth, all the families of the earth will be blessed through you. Is like, okay, so can people bless themselves? How do we affect blessing on ourselves or on people? Or it's a mess. Scott, I'm about to call on you. I'm so excited to hear what you say. But before I do, all of you guys, we have so many people in this room. And if you are hiding there listening to this beautiful conversation between Scott and Chuck, come out of hiding and jump on the boat. Scott, go for it.
So I was also thinking about this, but I was also wondering, there's this secular notion of the divine right of kings. And I was thinking, I actually have no idea if it's in some ways traced back to this idea that, Abraham is blessed by God, made the covenant for the Jewish people with God. And then therefore all of the people and then it says all of the families of man, of human, everybody on the earth is going to be blessed through Abraham. It's like there's this idea that there's this intermediary that's been divinely ordained in this particular unique relationship with God for this one man, but that is universalized as a way to sort of channel. And I think of blessing as sort of all good things, right? All the good things that come from God are flowing through, this relationship of covenant that is established through Abraham. And so as long as we stay in that covenant, that's what it seems to be implying. So I'm reading it very broadly, but I would love to know if there's any connection in scholarship between this verse in particular, or this section, and this idea of the divine right of kings.
Oh, that's a fantastic question, Scott. I don't know enough to say authoritatively no, but like semi-authoritatively no, that for the most part, the divine right of kings comes from the books of Samuel and Kings, where the way kingship is established in those books is because God picks the king, and then the king is anointed in oil, which is that word Mashiach, right? Is anointed in oil by a prophet. And that's because God has chosen the king. The best example of that is looking at when David is anointed, but that's the basis on which the divine right of kingship in Europe is built. And it may be that some places they come to this verse as well, come to Abraham as well, but as far as I know, no. Yafe. Okay, Barbara, and then Luz.
Okay. I have a feeling that blessed or blessed or means I pick you. When we say God bless you, or we say bless you or bless God, when we do our blessings, we're saying I pick you. I count on you. I want you to do it. I want you to represent me, or I want to represent you. When we talk to God and when we talk to each other, I think biblically it means I pick you, and that's sort of part of being the chosen people, part of God telling Abraham to leave home. I'm going to take you to a land where you are going to create a nation. You are going to be my pick, because you pick me first. He noticed God over all the other gods as being the king of gods, or the king, or being the most powerful. And so when he picked God, God said, I found somebody who can see me. Nobody can see God except Abraham, right? I mean, and Abraham doesn't see him with his eyes. He sees him with his very young knowing self, that there's something bigger than what everybody says there is, including his dad, including his people in his neighborhood. And so God says, move out of this damn neighborhood and find your own, where you can find people that are going to decide, see what you see. I want you to tell people what you see.
Awesome. Yeah. And so just little clarification. I love your point. I'm little tiny clarification in there. The story of Abraham choosing God is midrashic, right? It doesn't actually happen in the Hebrew Bible. It happens in Midrash. In the Hebrew Bible, we start with Lech Lecha. God chooses Abraham. God speaks to Abraham. Abraham's done nothing to deserve it. Abraham hasn't smashed up his father's idol shop or anything. That's all midrashic. But I love what you were saying about, and I think this builds really nicely on what Scott was saying about the idea of covenant being like, it's both sides are choosing each other. Both sides are party to this covenant. That there's something about covenant as a tool for governance that allows existence between two parties who aren't necessarily equal in power to come to an agreement about how to distribute power, how to be in relationship with each other. Cool. Okay. Luz, and then Donna. And I'm sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name. Correct me. Oh, Luz, are you there? Yeah.
Whatever is good leadership. So the benefits of good leadership and the hierarchy. And when you talk about blessing doesn't have to be chaos. It takes years. But you think it's chaos.
Luz, I'm so sorry. We can't, at least I can't really hear you. I think maybe your connection isn't so good right now. Would you mind? Would you mind putting your thought in the chat, and I'll read it out loud, because I don't think we can hear you right now.
Okay, sorry, I'll do it.
Okay, thank you. So Luz will put her comment in the chat. While she's doing that, Donna, go for it.
Okay. I was going back to answering your question about what does it mean, the blessing, the idea of blessing. And so I looked up blessing, and it reminded me that not only does blessing mean the favor, like I'm thinking of the priestly benediction, the threefold benediction, bless you and keep you. And what does keep you mean is got this idea of protection. And so that relates to power in a government, that the king or the leadership is supposed to protect the people as well as care about them, turn their face toward their people and protect them. Just a thought.
Oh, really, really interesting. And oh, I love what you're doing there, Donna, because it adds on, like, we are just coming out of, like, literally, we're just coming out of the flood in the Tower of Babel. We've just seen God as big, scary, powerful, and violent. And that in the in the wake of the flood, in the shower of the Tower of Babel, there's something about, hey, humans, if you want to be safe from me, God, then this is how you do it. That this is back to Rhea with the fuse box. Like, if you don't want to stick your fingers in the outlet and get electrocuted, the way you safely put your charger in is through Abraham. Cool. Okay. Luz wrote, leadership starts at the top. The blessings trickle down to the rest of the organization. Blessings don't have to be instantaneous. Blessings can start as chaos and don't show up as blessings until much later. Oh, that's really interesting. So we talked a lot 2 weeks ago about what God does to do, what God is as leader, as governor, is someone who creates order. Luz is suggesting that, okay, blessing is the, like, perhaps even the seed of order, but it can start out as a big mess. That the way you get towards order isn't an instantaneous thing. I'm curious. I want to hear more. I want Luz, keep writing if you've got more to say about that, and if other people want to add to that, I'm fascinated. All right, Alan, go for it.
I'm going to back off with respect to the word blessing. I'm not going to go to the cop out that God is when we bless God, that's problematic. So we're saying God is the source of all blessings. That's a cop out. I think that blessing is an acknowledgement, and that goes back to the root, the knee root, the berech, and Japanese, when they greet each other, are bowing. That's an acknowledgement of the other person and the other person's value as a human before we get to any power hierarchy.
Great. Incredible, right, Alan? So there's something here in this verse right here where it's saying, okay, y'all have been murdering each other. You all humans have made a mess of it. And in fact, I'm going to teach you how to recognize the humanity, and, like, how to teach each of you to recognize the humanity in your fellow person. That I'm not necessarily putting Abraham on the top of the pyramid or anything. I'm saying that the way humans should relate to each other is by recognizing each other as humans, is by seeing humanity in Abraham. And likewise, Abraham, what it means for you to receive blessing from me is that you will be in peaceful relationship with your fellow man, which is crazy, right? Like, here at the very beginning, like, Abraham's our hero, Abraham's our ancestor, Abraham's the big dog in town. And we might expect this to say, so as God chose Abraham, and God said, all right, Abraham, I'm going to make you rich. I'm going to give you a lot of sheep and goats and maidservants. and I'm going to give you the nicest house, and you'll get to be king, basically. And that's not what happens. Instead, God says, okay, I'm going to make it so that you can relate to all humans, and all humans have to relate to you. I'm going to keep you safe from those crazy humans who like to murder people by the, if they curse you, they'll be cursed. But I'm also just going to encourage you to live in a world where blessing is rampant. Really interesting. Okay. Anybody with a final thought on this verse? Because then it would be too embarrassing if we only got through one source in this entire class. Anybody? So as we'll keep going. So we've looked at this very first look. I'm going to skip the Pharaoh source. We're not going to read it. I'm just going to talk you through it really quickly. We have the Lech Lecha story, go forth from your land. Abraham goes forth to his land. He gets to Canaan. He's there for about 2 minutes. And then next thing we know, there's famine in the land, and Abraham goes down to Egypt and says, hey, Sarah, lovely, darling wife of mine, you know, those Egyptians, they're scary, they're bad, and they might want to take you because you're really pretty, so could you just lie, sort of, or obscure the truth at the very least, and say that you're my sister? And then indeed, Pharaoh's courtiers see her, they take her, and it's a problem, and God has to intervene and take Sarah out. And then when that happens, God does that by sending plagues against Pharaoh, which is like, oh, hello, we a little early for that story. When that happens, Pharaoh says, Abraham, what are you doing? Why did you say that? And then Pharaoh sends him away with Sarah, who's his wife, and with like all the possessions. So that's the first time we get the sister-wife story with Abraham. We'll get it a second time with Avimelech, which is source somewhere, which is, you don't even need to find the source. I'll just tell it to you quickly. So we get almost an identical story a second time. This time, instead of with Pharaoh, the king is Avimelech. Quite literally, that name translates to, who's got it? Avimelech. Donna, what is it?
I don't know. Something with king.
Yeah. Awesome. So the Melech bit is the king, and Avi. Who's got Avi? What's Avi? Scott?
I?
Yeah, the E bit is my, and the Av, short for Abba.
My father.
Father?
Yeah. My father is king. It's this very like kingy name. Repeats the sister-wife story with Abraham. This time, Avimelech takes Sarah once again. Avimelech suffers. Because of that, God closes all the wombs of all the women in his entire land. And then Avimelech's like, Abraham, why didn't you just tell me that she was your wife? We would have avoided this whole mess. And so Abraham's like, oh, well, she's kind of my sister. And then Avimelech sends Abraham off with lots of wealth, lots of servants, lots of good, fat of the land stuff. So both of those Pharaoh and Avimelech's sister-wife stories can be read as examples of what it means that those who bless you will be blessed, and those who curse you will be cursed, and through you all the nations of the earth can be blessed. We see Abraham interacting with, like, I mean, this is Abraham. Who is he? He's an immigrant, right? He just got to Canaan. He just, like, he's a nobody. He's a nothing. And he's here interacting with Pharaoh and interacting with Avimelech, right? Like, you remember what a big deal it was for Moses to show up at Pharaoh's house, and Moses grew up there? And now here's Abraham just like waltzing in saying, hey, how you doing? I got a very pretty wife. So Abraham's comfort in interacting with kings. 2, the way in which God carries out this those who bless you will be blessed, those who curse you will be cursed in Abraham's interactions with Pharaoh and Avimelech. Interesting. But I'm going to keep moving because I think there's a lot more interesting stuff that I want to keep going to. We're on source 3 now. We're going to think about Abraham and Lot. All right. Have any of you learned Lot with me? He's like, I think he's my second favorite biblical character. He's fascinating. But source 3, Scott, are you still here? Nope. Well, never mind. Rhea, hello, spicy. Is anybody up for chanting Genesis 13 verses 8 and 9? All right, I'll just read it because nobody wants to hear me chant. So this is Abraham talking to Lot, who's his nephew. He says, "Vayomer Avram el Lot," and Abraham said to Lot, "Al na tiyeh malivad beni uvenecha, uven ro'i uven ro'echa." Let there not be like quarreling, strife, fighting between me and between you, and between my shepherds and between your shepherds. Ki anashim achim anachnu. Because we are brothers, we are kinsmen, we are people who are in relation to each other. Halo kol ha'aretz lefnecha, is not the whole land or the whole world before you? Hipared nam alai, separate, please, from me. Im hasmol va'amina, if you go left, I will go right. But im hayamin va'esmila, and if you go right, I will go left. Tov. All right. So this is like small scale governance, but here we have two rich guys who are trying to share a place and living in the same land. And historically, meaning in the history of the world, but also in the first 12 chapters of Genesis we've read at this point, what that leads to is violence. What that leads to is murder. What that leads to is people killing each other over scarcity of resources. That's not what happens here. This is huge. This is like, if there's one like why Abraham verse, it's this one. What happens here? How is this governance? How is this leadership? How does this reflect back to God's creation of order through separation? How does this relate to the idea of those who bless you will be blessed, those who curse you will be cursed? What is it about this verse? How do you see Abraham governing or leading in this verse? I love this verse. It's shocking, right? It's incredible. It's be nice if this was actually the way the world worked. Rhea, Sylvia, then Scott.
Yeah. So I'm sorry I keep coming in to say something, but it's really so interesting. So we could look at it also about family relations, because most of Genesis is about family dysfunction and the awful things that family do to one another. And this is a model of not fighting over finance, that you come to an agreement because you're family. And in a sense, all of the Israelites later, when they become Israelites, they're family. So it's more of an internal, I think, how do you behave as a people, as a family?
Interesting. Okay, great. Yeah. So there's I love that, right? There's something about Genesis is about brothers and sisters with some of them, but mostly about brothers and within one family on the one hand, and on the other hand, these brothers tend to be the forefathers of nations, and that we can read from that with each family conflict, with each fraternal argument, we can read like the struggle that will happen between Lot's descendants and Abraham's descendants. We can read this as Midian versus Israel. So great. It functions both on the internal within the Israelite community, like stop fighting each other so much. Like, and we get that, right? God says, okay, I'm going to establish nachlaot for each tribe. I'm going to establish ancestral holdings for each tribe. So you don't have this issue. You don't need to fight over land because everyone knows where his, or I mean, not her, unless you're the daughters of Zelophehad, but where his land is. As opposed to between different nations where there's more likely to be tension. Yefei, okay, Sylvia, and then Scott.
Yeah, what I was thinking about was back in the late 70s, early 80s, I think. A lot of law courts went to mediation and arbitration for couples who were thinking about getting divorced, so that you saved a little money and you didn't go through the court system so fast. Maybe you could find a compromise. So I'm thinking that like Abraham was his style was mediation. His style was trying to compromise and get agreement rather than saying, you do this and I'm going to do that, or you do this because I'm the boss.
Okay, interesting, really interesting. And that's, well, Sylvia, you're taking us deep here, right? There's in verse 9, Abraham saying, Lot, go away. Abraham, this is a little bit of a power move. This is a little bit of a like, Lot, get off my yard kind of move. That it's much nicer. There's no, like, he doesn't actually say get off my yard, but he's telling Lot that Lot, you got to pick a direction and get away from me, and then I'll go the other direction. And it's we're not going to fight, we're not going to make a mess of it, but Abraham's made a decision that they are not going to live together. Abraham is initiating the divorce proceedings here, and saying, okay, the way we're doing it is we're going to a mediator, and let me tell you, I picked the mediator, but you can pick if you want to take the bus or the train to get there. Okay. Scott.
Everybody's comments have been so interesting to me. Thank you so much. And the only thing I would just add is that I'm thinking a lot about how governing a lot is about making distinctions. Who's in, who's out, who's right, who's blessed, who's cursed, like, and just separate. And this, you go north, we go south. We go south, you go north, right? But making those distinctions is a really critical piece of how you create order. And I think also way back to, Genesis and how God creates the earth, separates the heavens from the earth, the waters from the land, all those distinctions. So yeah, Dibarti.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, this is not the word that gets used for separation in Genesis 1. There it's lavdil, and here it's lehipered. But both of those words mean to separate, to divide, and that there's something going on. Like this is Abraham acting, but Tselem Elohim. This is Abraham acting in the image of God to say, okay, the way we escape chaos, the way we prevent chaos is by creating order. The way order works is separation. In order that there not be maliva, in order that there not be violent strife, fighting, quarreling between us, we gotta arrange things nice. Sometimes if you celebrate Thanksgiving, it is worth it, in fact, to make those little what are these called? Cards that you put on each seat, so that your uncle doesn't sit next to your nephew, and next thing you know,
Place cards.
Place cards. Thank you, Celia. Cool. Okay. other thoughts on this? Other thoughts on what's happening here? Other thoughts on like why is this verse such a big deal? Is this verse, how does this verse connect back to, specifically, we haven't talked about this yet, how does this verse connect back to those who bless you will be blessed, those who curse you will be cursed, and all the nations of the earth will be blessed by you or through you? Or Rhea, was that a hand? And then, oh no, I've talked too much, I'll pretend I didn't raise it hand. Please talk, Rhea.
Because I always felt sad for this family before the father, because first, Abraham's not the first to leave. The whole family leaves in the beginning from where they are. And that Abraham's father's son, who is Abraham's brother, dies, and they set off. And there's a dynamic of Abraham watching over his dead brother's son. And so there's this attachment which we tend to ignore, that, and I think it's important to get the underneath what is happening. This is not that big a family at the time. And Abraham seems to, Lot goes off to find his own place, and he ends up in a not a good place, and he has to escape, and Abraham has to save him and all the rest of that. So when I figure in this information, it gives me a different picture.
Fantastic, right? Fantastic. And I'm right there with you. That's, I mean, Lot, I told you guys, Lot is second favorite biblical character. He's like, when you read the Abraham cycle to get the story of Lot, he is an incredibly tragic figure. And that as Abraham is chosen and then Isaac is chosen, what that is the not choosing of Lot, is Lot getting pushed farther and farther out of the picture. Lot, who's like loses his father, Haran, who loses his wife, whose two daughters do unthinkable things, whose grandchildren are also his, like, this is not, like, wouldn't wish that on anybody. Okay. Donna, and then we're gonna jump to one more source.
Okay, well, yeah, I may be going off on a huge tangent here, so maybe I shouldn't even say it, but I am thinking, reading it like you go your way, I'll go my way, and that is Abraham and Lot. And then Jacob and Esau, they came together, but then Esau thought, oh good, we're going to be friends now, and Jacob went the other way. In other words, he did that. He said, I'll go north, and you. He didn't say it, he just did it, right? So it's doing the thing that will keep the peace, rather than taking the chance that you can get along together actually by living nearby and communicating with each other. And I just think about Gaza and Hamas, and today we're in the same place where we don't know how we're ever going to be able to get along, two peoples in one place.
Yeah, there's definitely this thing. I'm so glad you said that, Donna. There's definitely, although we are not bringing in contemporary politics other than that one comment of Donna's, but there's definitely this strand that runs through the entire Tanakh of, like, what it means to govern well is to impose order, because if you don't impose order, people kill each other. And that means separating. That means separating brother from brother. That means separating Abraham from Lot, Esau from Jacob. That means taking the 12 sons of Jacob, who started with like murderous violence, and separating them and saying, okay, each of you is going to have your own tribal allotment, because I can't have y'all making a mess together. It means, I mean, we're about to get to Leviticus in another couple of weeks. It means, and it means taking each tribe and arranging them differently around the ark so that they know where to stand and you don't have people jostling with each other. Yafei, really nice, Donna. All right, we've got very little time. I'm going to jump down a bunch of sources, and we're going to come to Genesis 18. This is the 7th source, where about God saying, oh, well, I'm going to go kill all of Sodom and Amara. And God says, should I hide from Abraham what I'm about to do? And Abraham will become a large and great nation, and all of the nations of the earth will be blessed through or by him. So it's that same Nivrachuvo that we had in our first source. And then God continues, Ki yadativ, because I have known him, Laman asher yitzaveh et banav et beto acharav, so that he can command his children and his dynasty or household after him, so that v'sharmu, so that they keep derech Hashem, like the way of God. What is that? La'asot tzedakah u'mishpat, to do justice and righteousness, to do law and order, to do righteousness and law. Laman hevi Hashem al Avraham et asher diber lav, so that God can bring to Abraham that which he has spoken to him. And then I'm really quickly, Abraham then does this negotiation with God about, hey, don't wipe out Sodom if you can find this many people. And one of the lines that Abraham says, this is verse 25, is Hashofet kol haaretz lo yaseh mishpat. Will or should the shofet, the one who judges, the one who carries out justice on all the earth, not make justice? And that shofet mishpat is the same word that I just read you from Genesis 18, where Abraham's got to teach his children to do derech Hashem, which is to lasot tzedakah u'mishpat, to do justice and righteousness. Okay, so once again, we're getting to, what does it mean to rule in the image of God? Well, it means that Abraham is the fuse box through which people are connected to God. It means that Abraham is creating separation and creating order so that people don't devolve into tohu vavohu or Hamas, which violence. And it means doing tzedakah u'mishpat. It means doing justiceness and righteousness, or at least struggling to, at least trying to, the same way that God is only trying to, right? Abraham's challenging God to say, aren't you going to do this too? We're out of time, which is insane. But if you have more thoughts about this, I would love to hear them, specifically about this tzedakah u'mishpat, because I wish we had another 15 minutes so we could really talk about it. I'm going to put my email in the chat, and feel free to send me an email. I will be back next week, where we will be looking at the final story in this chunk, this course. We'll be looking at Joseph in Pharaoh's court. So here, Abraham is the not king among kings. Next week, Joseph is the acting as king, while in fact he's not a king. Tough. Thank you guys so much. Thank you everyone for being here, and everyone who talked. That was brilliant. So kol hakavod. Well done. I'll see you next week.
Thank you.
Thank you
so
Beck.
much. Beautiful.